Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another video teaching going along with our Fear-Free Year Bible study. This is the Bible study where we're taking a look at all the different verses in the Bible which are instructive to us on how to live without fear and worry and anxiety in our present day and age. And for today's fear-free verse, we're back in the Old Testament where we're going to find another fear-free verse which is instructive to us on how to live without the fear of man, without having to people please our way through our lives. And I think there's so many verses like this in our Bible because it's so easy to do, unfortunately, is to kind of shrink back and not feel boldness as far as speaking out for God and for your views, and to just walk around tippy-toeing and being afraid of offending people all the time. So we're going to be in the book of Deuteronomy, and we're going to see a fear-free verse which is just surrounding, it's tucked into something which I think you're going to find fascinating anyway, regarding governance and how democracy sort of came about. You're going to see it here in the book of Deuteronomy spoken to the people of Israel. So here we are in Deuteronomy 1, and I'm going to start in verse 9, and then I'll talk a little bit about our fear-free verse when we get to it. Verse 9 of Deuteronomy 1. At that time I said to you, I am not able to bear you by myself. The Lord your God has multiplied you, and behold, you are today as numerous as the stars in heaven. May the Lord, the God of your fathers, make you 1,000 times as many as you are, and bless you as he has promised you. And I'll just stop to say, this is Moses speaking to the people of Israel, and you can see that he's referencing the fact that God has promised Israel something and he's followed through on it. They are right now 1 million strong, and that means that God has kept his covenanted promise with Abraham to make Abraham's line multiplied like the stars of the heavens. So Moses is saying, he's just giving a head nod to God that he's done, God has done what he said he was going to do, and this nation of Israel, who Moses has led out of Egypt, is now, some would say at this point, 2 million strong. And so God has faithfully done what he said in the Abrahamic covenant, made Israel a great nation. Okay, verse number 12. How can I bear you by myself, the weight and burden of you and your strife? Choose for your tribes wise, understanding, and experienced men, and I will appoint them as your heads. And you answered me, the thing that you have spoken is good for us to do. So I took the heads of your tribes, wise and experienced men, and set them as heads over you, commanders of thousands, commanders of hundreds, commanders of 50s, commanders of 10s, and officers throughout your tribes. And I charged your judges at that time, hear the cases between your brothers, and judge righteously between a man and his brother or the alien who is with him. You shall not be partial in judgment. You shall hear the small and the great alike. You shall not be intimidated by anyone, for the judgment is God's. And the case that is too hard for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it. And I commanded you at that time all the things that you should do. Now, you might have missed it, but the fear-free verse is in there. It's verse 17. You shall not be partial in judgment. You shall hear the small and the great alike. You shall not be intimidated by anyone, for the judgment is God's. And the case that is too hard for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it. So that's the fear-free verse. He's giving that command to these leaders who the people have chosen, and he's saying to them, don't be afraid of anybody. Don't be intimidated, because the judgment is God's. So don't be afraid of man. Don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid of offending people. Do the right thing, because the judgment is God's, and all will be well. Now, this whole exchange here in the book of Deuteronomy is actually started out, and you can see that Moses is referring to the fact that he had said this before. He's kind of reminiscing about it, and it's back in the book of Exodus, and we're going to read that in a second. But first I want to go back and say, you can see this democratic method playing out here back in the times of the Old Testament, in the wilderness wanderings, where Moses is shouldering the burden of these 2 million people, and it's too hard for him. And he says to the people, choose people for yourselves to be over you. And the people agree that they will do this, and they will follow what these people that they have chosen have said to do. So can you see, that's what we do today. When we vote, we're choosing for ourselves people to be over us, and then we agree to follow what they say to do. If they're the ones that we choose, then there they are, and whether we like it or not, we've put them above us, and they are now the ones appointed to be our leaders and judge what's right or wrong, and then put forth laws and so forth. So it's very interesting that this is 1500 BC. We see democracy at play, and we see it's coming off of the words of God, God's instruction, godly instruction. And now we'll go back to Exodus to see this in its full context, because this book of Deuteronomy is really the second iteration of everything to the people of Israel. That's Deutero, second time, basically. Second law is what it really means, because the first law was given in the book of Exodus to the first generation which had come out of the land of Egypt. The people of Israel, unfortunately, because they were causing so much strife and complaining and all this, they were unfortunately made by God to walk around the wilderness for 40 years. It would have been an 11-day journey, but because they needed to really walk around the wilderness and be in the desert and take some time to learn that God was truly their great king that they should be following. 40 years they are walking. And so at the end of the 40 years, Moses has to give the second iteration of the law. He's just repeating what had happened before, and that's where we get back into the book of Exodus, where the first time this happened is played out, is spoken about. So in Deuteronomy, what I just read, Moses is just retelling what happened back in Exodus. So this is Exodus 18, and I'm going to read to you what Moses was referring to. This is Exodus 18:13, the full story that Moses shortened in Deuteronomy. Verse 13, the next day Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law, whose name is Jethro, saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them known the statutes of God and his laws." Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and your people with you will certainly wear themselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice, and I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws and make them know the way which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, of tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves, so it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you, and you will be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace." And then it goes on to say that Moses did what his father-in-law told him to do. So isn't that an amazing thing? Here Moses is the leader of 2 million Israelites, and he's doing this thing on his own, and somebody above him, a mentor, comes to him and says, "You can't do this by yourself. You need to bear the burden with others, so do these things." And so that's an instruction to all you, maybe who are leaders yourself or are heads of household. You can't do this by yourself. You can't be the one that's judging everything and making all the decisions and think that it's going to go well for you, that you're not going to burn out. You've got to delegate to other people. And Moses here has a mentor his father-in-law who tells him this. He can't see it himself. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to bear the burden, but Moses' father-in-law can see that he's going to burn out, and so Moses listens to the advice of somebody older than him, and this is what we must do too. If you're, as I said, a leader, you got to get somebody who's older than you, even if it's just older than you in the faith, and bear your soul to them and ask them for advice, and then listen to godly advice in your leading of others. You really need to not do this on your own, to lean on other people who see the bigger picture or who have been through it before. So that's a great instruction. Now, the other thing I want to point out in here, in the details that we see in Exodus, is who Moses was supposed to look for to bear this burden with, and instruct the people to look for in their leadership. So take a look here, and you're going to see, first of all, it says that Moses as a leader is supposed to, in verse 20, warn them about the statutes and the laws and make them know the way which they must walk and what they must do. That means make the people know what God says to do. God is the leader, and you are just following God and then expressing what God would say to do. Verse 21, moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God and who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of 50s, and all that. So those are the type of people that they were supposed to look for. They were supposed to look for people, men who fear God, who won't take a bribe, who are trustworthy. Those are the people that you want governing you. People who respect God. People who are going to be your voice out there for God's ways. And people who are not going to be afraid to voice their opinion. They're not going to people please. They're not going to be afraid of looking bad or what people's opinion are going to be of them. They're going to be bold and speak what God would say about situations and hold the line for you. They're representing you who also fear God. That's who you want to appoint. That's who you want to vote for to be your leader. And trustworthy people who won't take a bribe. See, isn't this just very instructive to us here and now today? These are the type of people that you want to elect. People who fear God's words, God's ways. Those are the people you want to look to. And you might say to yourself, like, how do I know if they're following God's ways? Well, you got to look at their character. You've got to look at how they voted before or what they're speaking about before. And there are very certain basic things that you can look for. What do they think about abortion? What do they think about the murdering of innocent children in the womb? If they're following God, they think that abortion should not be something they vote for. What do they think about the nation of Israel? Do they stand with Israel? Because if they're following God, God's word says that he will bless those who bless Israel. So are they all for Jerusalem as the capital? And are they all for standing with Israel? These are the things you can look for. And are they trustworthy? Will they take a bribe? Do they seem like they're just in it for the money? They're in it for the fame? Or these are the kind of things you can look for. People who are swayed by public opinion or afraid to speak out for God. That's a problem. You don't want to vote for them. And so that's what the fear-free verse says. If we go back to Deuteronomy, it says you want people who will not be intimidated by others. They will not be afraid of others, and in their voting process. And anyway, that goes all the way up the line. You can see here that Moses was supposed to still judge the big things, but all the heads of the thousands, the heads of the 50s, the heads of the 10s, they were going to do the smaller things, and all of the people elected should be fearing the Lord and not be intimidated to say, I'm following God and God says do this, so that's what I'm going to vote for. That's what I'm going to do. If they won't speak about their belief, then there's a problem. They're being intimidated by the current climate, and they don't want to say that they're a Christ follower. That is a problem. Meanwhile, it's a problem for us too if we are afraid to do the same. If we're intimidated by speaking up and saying that we believe in these certain things because God believes in them, there is a problem. And so when you, in your mind, have a decision to make, have something to judge, remember that God is the judge. And that's what that verse says too. You know, at the end of the line, it's God who's the judge over all these things. And if you're going by what God's law says, you don't have to worry. So if you're going to God and you're praying, is a decision the right thing to do? If you're going to God in prayer and with thanksgiving, you'll have peace over your decision, and you'll have peace speaking up and speaking out for God's ways. When somebody asks you, what are you going to do? You should not be intimidated, because you should have God's peace that you are speaking His words and His ways, and knowing that He's the ultimate judge. And that really just brings me to Philippians, a verse that is very, very familiar to most Christ followers, Philippians 4. But it's something, if you're not a follower of Christ, it's something you got to just hold on to and put it in your back pocket and bring it out when you need peace over a decision, and where you're feeling like, I don't want to speak out for what's right because I'm afraid of man. I want to people, and you're starting to feel like you want to people please. Listen to this. Verse 4 of Philippians 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. So you will have peace in your speaking up and your speaking out if you've gone to God with prayer and thanksgiving, and you've gotten your answer, and you're about to speak out in reasonableness. You don't have to be anxious. God is the ultimate judge. Speak up, speak out for God, and let His peace just stay in your heart, because you know you've asked Him and you're following Him, and you're not going to be afraid of what anybody else thinks. You're just going to follow your God with your words, with your hearts, with your actions, and let God be the judge, and not worry about mankind judging you. All right? I hope that's helpful to you, and I hope you had a blessed Thanksgiving, and it's with Thanksgiving and for Jesus that I do this all. Bye now. See you next time.